time to get out of the comfort zone because these people aren't playing games.
We're going to organize. Humanity's going to come together. We are swinging muskets here, toe-to-toe with the globalists. They're bloodied, we're bloodied. It is absolute, total war.
Good evening and happy Friday. It's Infowars Nightly News, and I'm your fill-in host, Rob Dew. Alex is taking a night off after he had a really long week, but it was a very interesting week news-wise, and we've got a great show for you. Coming up, we're going to be visited by Marjorie Farabee. She's with donkeyscando.com, and they recently were rebuffed in their efforts to put a 103,000 signature petition. They were trying to bring it up to Austin, and they were told they could not enter for various reasons. And then next, the interview that didn't happen yesterday will happen today. Pepe Escobar will be joining us from the Asia Times to talk about all things Iran and what's going on in the Middle East. And finally, after our break, we're going to have Mike Adams, the health ranger, sitting in studio to talk about a host of issues, including cancer and an article that we're going to cover later about cyborg implants. But let's get on with the news. This is an issue that's going to affect a lot of people, especially us, being a news organization who are granted fair use on certain things. When we see a news item that is important to us and fellow info warriors out there, we like to show it to you. And especially older works. There's older things that can be used to illustrate points today. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled, and this was, I guess, published today in a 6-2 ruling. The court ruled that just because material enters the public domain, it is not territory that works may never exit. And this is from Ars Technica. The top court was ruling on a petition by a group of orchestra conductors, editors, performers, publishers, and film archivists who urged the justices to reverse an appellate court that ruled against the group, which has been relying on artistic works in the public domain for their livelihoods. So somebody takes Metropolis and adds a different movie score to it, which happens here in Austin a lot. Well, that won't be allowed if certain groups are allowed to come in and recopyright these works. And basically what this means, you know, fair use is going to be going the way of the dinosaur. You're going to have everybody under the sun copywriting everything and maintaining who has control onto that. We've already seen that happening in the internet. There's a company out there that wanted the color blue copyrighted and trademarked so they couldn't be used. And I just want to add one more quote here. Anthony Falzone, the executive director of the Fair Use Project at Stanford, said this. He said the decision was unfortunate, and it suggests Congress is not required to pay particular close attention to the interest of the public when it passes copyright laws, and he's speaking the truth there. And here we go on radiation news, which affects everyone, considering we have Fukushima, where they can't even find some of the fuel rods. A study finds that childhood leukemia rates double near nuclear power stations. The study by the French Institute of Health and Medical Research, or INSERM, found that leukemia rates are twice as high among children under the age of 15 living within a 3.1-mile radius of France's 19 nuclear power plants. INSERM has carried out similar research in conjunction with the Institute of Radio Protection and Nuclear Safety, or IRSN, and the team of 6 for over 2 decades, but they've never found a higher coincidence or incidence of leukemia. So they're finding it now, and it's because we got radiation everywhere under the sun, and now in our atmosphere and our water due to Fukushima, and for the next great disaster that awaits nuclear power, because it's a science, but it's not a science that is going to help us, and we need to find different ways to create power other than creating nuclear waste. Moving on, we got Ron Paul news. Ron Paul had a great showing in the debate last night, even though they tried to exclude him from several questions. But this just in from the state. To South Carolina supporters, Paul is a movement, not just a candidate. He has a vision of a broken America that requires extreme solutions. And this is done by several state senators. They got behind Paul, and their names are Danny Verdeen, Kevin Bryant, Lee Bright, and Tom Davis. We covered the Tom Davis endorsement earlier this week, and they had to say, Paul is as much as a movement as a candidate, offering an unorthodox Republican vision for restoring the country, they say, and he will speak for them when he wins Saturday's GOP primary or not. So whether he wins or not, these guys are behind him, and maybe the residents in South Carolina, which includes my father-in-law out there, should support Ron Paul because he is a man with a true vision, not just a bunch of hot air and bloated gas, which we'll get into later. Initial results show Ron Paul won the South Carolina Republican debate. There's many online polls which we're going to start pulling up. The first poll out of the Naples News. Who has your vote in the January 31st Florida GOP primary? 76% Ron Paul, 10% for Mitt Romney. Wow. The second poll, which is out of CNN. Which GOP candidate do you want to win the presidential nomination? 42% for Ron Paul, 29% for Mitt Romney. Next poll. Who won the Southern Republican presidential debate? That was from Poll Daddy. 98% Ron Paul, 1% Newt Gingrich, and all the rest. And finally, Newsday. With Huntsman and Perry dropping out this week, which GOP candidate will you support? 71% Ron Paul. The next closest is Newt Gingrich. So as you can see, most people out there want Ron Paul. They don't want any of these other guys, or at least the ones who are answering these poll questions. But I guess when you have the elections rigged and you can call it with a gentleman's agreement, you can make anybody win. There you go. We got some highlights from the debate. The first one, they asked Newt Gingrich if he was being attacked, if he felt he was being attacked by the media, and I guess they asked everybody else that question. And here's what Ron Paul had to say about the media.
I think too often all of us are on the receiving ends of attacks from the media, and it's very disturbing because sometimes they're not based on facts, and we suffer the consequences. You know, sometimes it reminds me of this idea of getting corporations out of running campaigns, but what about the corporations that run the media? I mean, they're always in charge.
And the next one, of course, is an issue that Ron Paul's dealt with a lot, and it's the issue of abortion. And apparently they weren't going to ask him that question after they asked the three other non-doctors the question. And the crowd started booing, and they wanted Ron Paul to answer the question. They wanted to hear his answer. And so with only 4 people being there, the idiot prostitute had to finally ask him the question. Here's the clip.
Let's take another question. Congressman, I'll bring you in on this one. Let's take a question now from social media. Question. Before we move on, you want in on this issue? They want you in on this issue. Would you like in on this issue?
But John, once again, it's a medical subject, and I'm a doctor, you know. No, I do want to make a couple comments because I can remember the very early years studying obstetrics, and I was told, and it was before the age of abortion, and I was told, taking care of a woman that's pregnant, you have 2 patients, and I think that solves a lot of the problem about, you know, when life begins and all. But I also...
Oh, and there's the 3 non-doctors looking on like, yeah, he's kind of right, actually. There was another question, a medical question. It was about Obamacare, and they asked all 3 of the other candidates what their opinion was, and then they didn't ask Ron Paul, and once again the crowd had to intervene on behalf of Ron Paul. And it's pretty sad that CNN, who employs Skeksis Award winner Dana Bash, I think that's her husband, actually, John King, so that they're working in tandem to try and keep the people from hearing about what Ron Paul has to say. But no matter how much they try, the message is getting out. And just as those South Carolina senators said, Ron Paul is a movement just as much as he is a candidate. And now we move on to a story that we covered back in October, which is going to lead into our next story. And it's Honduran farmers slaughtered in the name of global warming. And 23 farmers in Honduras were slaughtered in cold blood by hired mercenaries as they tried to protect their land from being seized by a corporation who wanted to use their land to produce biofuel as part of a United Nations accredited EU global trading scheme. And there you go. You have committees and organizations who have everybody's interest in mind except those they want to go out and kill, which we showed you last night when Alex went over all the instances in which the UN was killing people or kidnapping people, are not doing what they were supposed to do. And then you have the other people revolting, like the Haitians, who are now saying, get out. And they're painting up the UN soldiers to look like chupacabras and stuff like that. Which leads us to this next one. Fans protest wild donkeys being killed at Big Bend Park. Well, how do wild donkeys and Honduran farmers, how do they relate? Well, you have these bureaucracies that are making these decisions and then implementing totalitarian, very threatening solutions, which involves killing things. In this case, wild donkeys, which are being slaughtered at Big Bend Park. And Texas Parks and Wildlife officials want to remove the animals from the 315,000-acre park in West Texas because there's just not enough room for 300 donkeys. And at least 75 have been shot from a herd of estimated up to 300. And with more on the needless slaughter of those cute little donkeys, we turn to Marjorie Farabee. She is the founder of the Wild Burro Protection League, and she recently was featured in that Houston Chronicle article, going down to the Capitol trying to deliver a petition with over 100,000 signatures to get them to stop doing this out of Big Bend Park. Marjorie, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
We're doing great over here, and but I saw this story a couple days ago, and it really made me mad. So tell us about donkeys. What is their place in human history and development?
Well, it should make you mad. Donkeys are incredibly warm and caring creatures. They are natural healers. They're being used in places like the Donkey Sanctuary and have been used for decades in therapy for children. They help returning soldiers with post-traumatic stress disorder. They've been helping Alzheimer's patients. They help memory problems with patients, and they've been superb in helping children that have autism. They don't cure them, but they help them to lead actually a productive and useful life.
Yeah.
Their honesty and their courage and their wisdom and their empathy is picked up by these children, and they're able to open up to them as they can to know.
In addition to that, the history, a lot of the settlements might not have happened if it wasn't for donkeys and pack mules, essentially.
Oh, without question. People like to say, well, the horse won the West. Well, that's somewhat true. I mean, I was a horse lover before I was a donkey lover. I had access to them first. But the fact is that the first trails that were made by the explorers and the surveyors, and they went in with their donkeys, and the donkeys could go 4 days without water. They didn't require very much food because they're very efficient in how they use their food. And many an explorer's life was saved by the amazing abilities of the donkey to find water. They could go into terrain that horses and mules couldn't travel, and those little trails were made, and then the mules and horses followed, and then later the wagon trains. In fact, Santa Fe has a place called Burro Alley. They recognize that was the end of a lot of donkey trails. Mm-hmm. That was how the town was established.
And I think you could still go to the Grand Canyon and actually take a donkey down into the canyon. They still have those. So, and those are around, and that's a tourism attraction, essentially. For
people love them. People love it. And it's a multi-million-dollar show industry. People spend lots of money showing donkeys and mules, like the Bishop Mule Days. In fact, that's something that we really want to do in the Big Bend Ranch area, is to see if we can go to Sol Ross or somebody else that's willing to work with us to set up Wild West Donkey and Mule Days and feature these amazing animals, and that would help the township. The people of that area want the donkey to stay. They want the burro to stay. A lot of them were bringing photographs to the meeting that we had in Alpine, showing pictures of their grandmothers on a donkey. they've always been there. They built the Southern Pacific Railroad. They delivered milk to the miners in Terlingua mine. They were part of the mines. There's a lot of features in the park that are named after the borough,
right,
because they were so incredibly important to establishing the civilization in that area.
Well, and so who are the people that are trying to kill these donkeys?
Oh, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and of course Governor Perry, who continues to give them carte blanche. In fact, he just recently stated again he trusted Texas Parks and Wildlife to make the right decisions.
And they're basing their decisions, you claim, off faulty findings. In fact, even no studies at all. They're claiming that these are
study. They've never done one, and there's not a scientist anywhere that would accept that, to take a species and completely eradicate a species from an ecosystem without doing a study. There's the law of unintended consequences. You do not know what plants, what insects, what amphibians that particular animal benefits, and how they are symbiotically related to the ecosystem around them. The burros have been there for, well, they're returned native, and Cabeza de Vaca brought them back to Mexico in 1527, and they've been there ever since. They have an entire migration route that is part of the Chihuahua biosphere, which is a globally recognized precious ecosystem, and encompasses in Big Bend Ranch State Park. So in essence, they really have 5 million acres that they traverse upon, and that includes the Rio Grande. The park itself has over 250 springs. So, if they try to say to you that there's not enough water, that's blatantly not true.
Well, and they can find their own water source,
and
too.
They provide water for the other animals, because they are able to hear the water underground. They're able to smell the water. They go directly to the right spot. They dig a little 3-foot hole. It comes up. The water springs up. It's clear. It's filtered. It's clean. They drink. The wildlife around them drinks. Amphibians, insects, birds all drink from that, life-giving water that they provide.
So you tried to deliver a petition with over 100,000 names on it, and you applied for the permits. Tell us about that process and what happened to you.
Oh, it took months. It's not an easy process when you're just a normal citizen trying to accomplish a good thing. They don't tell you how to do the process, but you're supposed to pull permits for each and every segment that you do. There's the segment for the police. There's the segment for road closure. There's a segment for the special events office, and so on and so forth. So I went through the process. I learned it, and I got all of the permits pulled. And each and every agency that I called, I asked, is this everything I need to do? Don't I need a paper permit? No, you are authorized. You are okay. You're covered. Well, I've had a lesson learned. I won't be burned twice when we do our protest. I will have permit in hand. But basically, we started having trouble the day before the event. We had we got a phone call saying that Mindy Epler with the State Preservation Board had been looking at our site, and she became concerned that the size of my wagon wouldn't fit through the bollards. And I told her that I was a very good driver. I had won High Point driver at the Texas Shootout in 2010, and I was capable of making it through a narrow opening. She then sent another email saying that that they could not accommodate me by lowering the bullard so that I could go through. So stop it, Ozzy. So
That's not a green screen behind you. Those are actual real donkeys, right?
Those are real donkeys. Yes, they are. And they're trying to get some attention. They're getting a little upset that I am not turning them around. That's not the way it's supposed to work. So anyway, we were helped a lot by the police. I have to send my kudos out to the police in Austin. They were, every single one of them. They were petting our donkeys. They loved the donkeys. The motorcycle patrol was, they were just terrific. And
when they are taking blood illegally from people or beating up women, yeah, they are. I guess they are nice guys.
I'm just saying. I was actually pleasantly surprised, because that was the only high point in the whole thing.
Right.
So Captain Science tried to help me, said that they weren't going to let me go through because I couldn't fit through the bullards.
Mm-hmm.
And so we drove up there, and in fact, the bullard was down.
Oh.
It was down, but they blocked it with a car.
Wow.
And wouldn't let me through.
And who do you think was responsible for doing this?
Oh, it was the State Preservation Board.
State Preservation Board. And they had, you said I was talking to you on the phone earlier today, you said they stopped you from where you were going to park your trailer. They blocked you from
well, yeah, that's the first thing in the morning when we arrived to our designated and pre-authorized staging area at the daycare center. We pulled up, and that's where the day started. Quit, you guys. The manager came out and said that the authorization had been pulled. She had gotten a phone call, and the authorization had been pulled. I asked who had called, and she said, "I can't tell you that."
Wow.
So
I'm going to insert a donkey pun here. It sounds like a real jackass.
Well, it was not cool.
Yeah. So where can people go to sign the petition, to provide support for you guys, to get the word out?
That would be Donkeys Can Do.
Mm-hmm.
www.donkeyscando.com, and over on the left-hand side, you'll find the petition, which is ongoing. We will resubmit it, and we are hoping to get 500,000 signatures, if that's at all possible. We think it might be.
All right.
Awareness. Keep in mind, I mean, this is 103,000 signatures, and we've had no coverage.
Right.
The media has really blocked us out. So, we are only just now, as a result of going there. And
seems like you're the Ron Paul of the Nature Conservancy movement, essentially, because the media has really shut him out as well.
Well, yeah, I guess I don't really necessarily want to be Ron Paul, but...
Well, you're not getting media coverage. Hey, Marjorie, thanks for spending time with us today. We appreciate it. DonkeysCanDo.com. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll get some people over there helping you guys out, and because I don't really feel we should be killing donkeys with no good reason, especially.
Well, I have to tell you, this is bigger than the burros. This is about an entire ecosystem. This is about the people's right to have access to that ecosystem. 84% of the people that come to these parks are coming to see wildlife, and yet they are destroying all of that wildlife. What they're going to come in and see a desert that's dead and devoid of life. And the only people that will be able to enjoy that park for the short term will be the people that can pay a lot of money for a helicopter ride up to see the bighorn. And they soon too will fail because the ecosystem will be dead.
Well, and we brought up this article that we covered in early October. Honduran farmers slaughtered in the name of global warming. You have a group of people who decide something should happen without actually doing any type of study or anything, and then the wave of tyranny is unleashed. So I mean, this could easily be another group of people. It could be another species. It could be anything. Just by waving a magic wand, we can people can go in and just start indiscriminately killing. And so that's one reason.
They're killing all the elk and all the oudad. They're killing all the bobcat and all the cougar in the park too.
Yeah, this is definitely something that should be looked at. Marjorie, that's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us today, and hope people go to donkeyscando.com and check that out, see what they got going on there. And there's a picture Marjorie showed us before we started the interview, and it is the Texas Parks and Wildlife lined up, and they've got the poor donkeys in a firing squad. Who would want to shoot donkeys? I don't know. Weird individuals. But anyway, you can go to donkeyscando.com to find out more how you can help. Cute little guys. Anyway, on to more disgusting news. If it could get any more disgusting than shooting donkeys, Jabba the Newt cancels campaign event due to poor attendance. Apparently, Newt Gingrich had canceled a campaign appearance, and he was scheduled to speak at the Southern Republican leadership on Friday. But a campaign spokesperson told reporters that he would no longer be appearing due to poor attendance. And this is right on the heels of so-called winning the Drudge Report poll of who won last night's South Carolina debate, where Newt supposedly took charge and defended himself from leaving his wife for another, well, there she is right there, another lady, when his second wife had multiple sclerosis, and this is on the heels of leaving his first wife when she had cancer. And, you could see the guy who gave him a plug right before he left the campaign. Yeah, welcome back, loser, Mr. Perry. So there we go. No one likes Newt, yet they keep telling you he's the one next to Mitt Romney. It's either one of those two. Moving on. Cyborgs are coming. Living brains implanted with electronic chips to replace faulty parts, and they put faulty in quotes. And this is out of the Mail Online. And it goes over in Tel Aviv University. There's a professor, Maddie Mintz, who is out to help the world by fixing the brain. And she says, imagine there's a small area in the brain that is malfunctioning. And imagine that we understand how it works. And we try to replicate this part of the brain with electronics. So I wonder if they're talking about the faulty parts of the brain that make you question authority or speak out when something's wrong, or tell cops to stop when they're bending some woman's arms behind her back because she told her friend, hey, you don't have to take a breathalyzer, which is completely right. So maybe those types of faulty parts is what she's talking about. You know, her intentions may be good, but we know those in power will get that power, and will do it to control the populace and replace those parts in us that are deemed faulty. So that's that. You can check that out in Mail Online. And finally, our last story of the evening comes from the Asia Times, and it's by Pepe Escobar, who will be joining us shortly. The U.S. GCC, Fatal Attraction. GCC stands for Gulf Cooperation Council, the club of 6 wealthy Persian Gulf monarchies, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, founded in 1981, and which in no time configured as the prime strategic U.S. backyard for invasions of Afghanistan in 2001 and Iraq in 2003, and for the long drawn-out battle of the new great game in Eurasia, and also as the headquarters for containing Iran. So we have a map here of the countries shown in there and their strategic importance. You can see Iran right north of there, but they're Saudi Arabia, Oman, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. And we have some very lucrative deals with these guys. In fact, they're probably keeping us running with some of their deals. We got in Saudi Arabia, $67 billion arms deal. UAE, we sell them bunker-busting bombs. Oman, Stinger missiles. Kuwait, well, we got 15,000 troops there. And Bahrain, we have a $53 billion arms deal, but it hasn't gone through yet because of their ridiculous human rights violations. So that brings us to this next quote. The rationale for this weaponized orgy is provided by the usual suspect logic, the necessity of building a coalition of the willing to counter Iran. Why Iran? Because Iran is not part of the GCC, that is a pliable U.S. strategy, just like those jolly good times under the Shah. And with more on the U.S.'s dealings in the Middle East and probing up into Iran, we turn to our, I guess he's kind of our foreign correspondent now, ad hoc from the Asia Times, Pepe Escobar. How's it going, sir?
Wonderful. Thanks for having me. Great
Thanks
pleasure.
for joining us. We missed you yesterday, but we're glad you could join us today. And we know it's a weird time difference and everything, but you look great. How are things going in Iran? What's going on?
Oh, where to start, in fact? Okay, let's start with the letter that President Obama sent to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. This has been all over the Iranian press for the past 48 hours at least. First part of the letter, according to some parliamentarians who actually read it, is threats. Just threats. Second part of the letter is basically roll over and die. This means Iran has to accept the UN sanctions, the unilateral US sanctions, stop enriching uranium to 20%, and then everybody sits down and start talking. So what kind of diplomacy is this, you know?
That's a gun to your head diplomacy, essentially.
Exactly, it's the roll over and die school of diplomacy, you know?
Yeah.
So the thing is, they would be willing to talk to the P5+1, as they call it. This means the 5 members of the UN Security Council plus Germany. These discussions were rudely interrupted almost a year ago. They would be willing to go back to the table if they are respected in terms of this. They are signatory of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, so they are allowed to enrich uranium for civilian purposes and in their own territory. But even, remember, 2 years ago, when Brazil and Turkey brokered a swap agreement, uranium would be enriched, then transferred to Turkey, and then back to Iran. The Brazilians and the Turks, they spent 18 hours non-stop in Tehran discussing with them this swap agreement, and they clinched a deal. So this means that it's possible to clinch a deal with their nuclear program. They have to be respected as a regional power. And the U.S. strategy, whatever the government in power, Bush administration, Obama administration, doesn't matter. It's, like we were just mentioned, threats, sanctions, threats, and the roll over and die approach. It will never work.
It's like the Teddy Roosevelt puff up your chest and, carry a giant stick and use it.
Exactly. So, and in one of the pieces that I wrote this week for Tom Dispatch, there's the red line angle, which for the U.S. is always very important. The problem is the red line is shifting all the time. It used to be you cannot enrich uranium. Then it changed. Leon Panetta said that like 2 weeks ago. You cannot build a nuclear bomb.
Right. And he says we know they're not building a bomb.
Everybody who is not even an expert, apart from the National Intelligence Agency, apart from the IAEA inspectors, everybody knows that they are not building a bomb. And the Supreme Leader himself, he had a fatwa, a ruling edict, where he explicitly said that building a nuclear bomb or possessing nuclear weapons is anti-Islamic. And these guys, they follow their religious code, the Shiite religious code, very strictly. And Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic, he was saying that from the beginning, 79, 80, and during the Iran-Iraq war during the 80s, all the time, we will never build a nuclear bomb. It's anti-Islamic. So the point is, why do they really need a nuclear energy? Is to free the oil that they have. They produce, they export 2.5 million barrels of oil a day. To export it to gain foreign currency. And they have refinement problems as well because of the sanctions, especially. So they have a case. And on top of it, they're signatory of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Everything that they do is monitored by the IAEA. There was an IAEA theme in Iran the last few days. And they are monitoring this new underground enrichment plant near the holy city of Qom as well. So anything that they do, the inspectors know what they're doing. It's impossible for Iran to build a nuclear bomb without the IAEA knowing. Absolutely out of the question.
Right, but instead of sitting down and talking, we've got U.S. commandos. This is out of the Atlantic Monthly, I believe. Yeah, the Atlantic Monthly group. Commandos are getting close to the Iran border. We've got scientists being assassinated. And then we have reports from Turkey saying that Iran plans to attack the U.S. embassy. And how credible is that?
No, this is completely stupid. First of all, the only thing that they don't want at the moment is to push for a confrontation. On the contrary, they are being pushed for a confrontation by both U.S. and Israel. And the regional players know it. Like in terms of Turkey, for instance, I'm talking about the highest levels. Turkish Foreign Minister Davutoglu, he was in Tehran only a few days ago. And they were discussing that as well. And they were discussing ways of mutual cooperation in the future, including coming back to the table within the next few days in Istanbul, in Turkey, to talk to the Americans and Europeans again. But when you look at the letter we were discussing a few minutes ago, how are they going to discuss the rollover and die approach? It's impossible, right?
Right. Yeah. Man, Iran's not alone, though, in this battle. They've got some allies that are pretty big. And they've got China. Russia has already said that the U.S. should not attack. What's going to happen if we do, in fact, if these commandos do start invading or get captured behind enemy lines? Is that going to be considered an act of war?
It is not only it is an act of war, but it will be a huge propaganda coup for them. Can you imagine if you have a commando in southeast Iran or southwest Iran, which are very, very touchy areas, or in the south near the Persian Gulf, where most of the oil and gas is? For them, it would be an enormous propaganda coup. And considering the mishaps in Afghanistan, it's not far-fetched to think that some of these commanders will be arrested sooner or later, right? Yeah. So the killing of scientists, can you imagine if these were Israeli scientists killed by Iran? We'll be already at World War III, right? But the other way around is permissible. So the double standards in terms of the West, they are cosmic, in fact. Now it's like a meteorite. It's obvious. So, but they are, what I'm getting from my sources in Tehran, the leadership, they are threading very carefully. They want negotiations. They won't be intimidated into a mishap or a fatal mistake, especially in the Gulf. The only way they would react really violently is if this oil embargo by the US and the Europeans are meeting on Monday to decide about the oil embargo. If this is in effect starting in June, then they will react somehow. And it could be something related to the Persian Gulf, because then their backs will be against the wall. But they might not even react, because if they are dealing with, like in one of my pieces, I talk about that. They are dealing with a lot of countries in their own currencies. So the petrodollar for Iran is over. And this, in the long run, for a lot of developing countries, can be a great idea. Let's buy dollar in our own currencies or in a basket of currencies. So one of the reasons that the US hegemony all over the world is so strong is because of the petrodollar. And there are cracks already in this armor. A few days ago, Prime Minister of China, Wen Jiabao, went to visit what? The Persian Gulf itself. He went to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Emirates. They made a swap deal with the Emirates. A few $1 billion is just the beginning. But for the Chinese, they always say that, first you need a little stone, then you get the whole mountain. So the little stone is the Emirates already have yuan in their vaults as well. So they're going to be trading more and more in yuan with China. And that will include sooner or later oil. With Iran, China and Iran, they already trade in rial, the Iranian currency, and yuan as well. So can you imagine in a few years, lots of developing countries, apart from Iran, trading in oil and gas in their own currencies? So, this advantage, unfair advantage, many will say, that the U.S. has enjoyed for the past decades will be gone.
Yeah, it would lower the influence of the dollar for sure.
Absolutely.
And what kind of, we're basically buying our influence in there by providing arms that they can't build themselves into the GCC area that we went over with earlier in the show. What other details can you provide on that, other than that were in your article? We were talking about the $63 billion deal to Saudi Arabia, the missiles to, I believe it was Oman. You got the bunker busting bombs. Go a little bit into that.
Look, the basic data is in the story. It's a trade, the petrodollar and weapons trade. So you sell all your oil in dollars, and we provide you political cover and all the weapons, all the big toys in the world. Not the latest generation, though, because the latest generation always goes to Israel.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they have the next latest toys, right?
They have the VCR and the beta decks, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. So the thing is, the leadership in the GCC, they are looking at the future, and they are seeing the erosion of the power of the dollar, the relative decline of the hyperpower. They're looking at the ascension of China. They're looking at the fact that they are trading with China more and more. Mm-hmm. So they're they start to hedge their bets, which is something that never happened until, I would say, a few months ago, or maybe a few days ago. In the future, Saudi Arabia already sells more oil to China than it sells to the US in proportion. So, sooner or later, they will be selling, I would say in a few years' time, they will be selling probably 40 or 50% of their exports, oil exports, will be to China, India, to Asia in general. So they see that the current is flowing from the Atlanticist West to Asia. Asia is the economic future. Mm-hmm. So they're hedging their bets, and sooner or later, maybe there will be cracks in the GCC-US relationship, because the US will look at the GCC and say, so even if we sell all our weapons to these guys, they're getting closer and closer to the enemy, the strategic enemy, which is China. So can you imagine? So we're projecting to 2020, 2025. So I guess a lot of people in Washington must be really, really worried, because you cannot go against this trend. It's inevitable.
Do you think they're going to try to preempt that and maybe strike sooner and then to kind of garner that support from the GCC instead of waiting until they don't have that support anymore? The support can't be bought, essentially.
Yeah, look, I hate crystal balls, definitely. But the thing is, I don't think a strike would happen in an electoral year this year. Don't forget that this is an electoral year, not only in the U.S., but in Iran as well. They have parliamentary elections in March. Mm-hmm. And they are preparing for their presidential elections next year as well. If we have a Republican president in the U.S., I think the whole thing changes radically. If we have Obama too, Obama himself, remember from the beginning of the Obama mandate, he said, okay, let's try some kind of dialogue with Iran. Obviously, it has to be something different from the rollover and die approach, of course. But considering that Obama he'll be on the second mandate, he'll be more or less free. He could even approach Iran with some real, possibility of a negotiation. So it depends on who gets elected in November. That's essential. And the Israelis, considering the Bibi government, which is completely crazy, they cannot do something by themselves. First of all, they don't have the capability. They need overfly rights over Iraq, and Iraq is not going to give that to them. Forget it. The Obama administration doesn't want a strike against Iran, and that they have been saying explicitly. Even Obama has been saying that explicitly. So Israel cannot do it behind the U.S. back. Absolutely out of the question. But after January 2013, that's a completely different story. And the GCC, in fact, when they say that they want a regime change in Iran, they don't know what that might happen inside the GCC itself, because the Shiite minorities in the GCC and the people who don't have political participation in the GCC, they also will want regime change in the region. Don't forget that these are autocracies. They treat their own people, like in Bahrain, like garbage. And in other places, like in Saudi Arabia, in fact, they don't even treat them. They are completely isolated. People, the Shiites who live in the eastern province near Bahrain. And in other places like the Emirates, there's not even an indigenous class. Most people are guest workers from India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and they are treated like, not even as citizens, like fifth-class people, So obviously they'll start having ideas as well.
All right. Wow. Anything else you want to add before we have to run?
Let's say that we were almost at the tipping point a few days ago because things are really, really scary. I think there's going to be a lull. If they go back to the table within the next few days to discuss the nuclear program, this could be a good thing as long as the Iranians are not pressed against the wall. There are elections in March, so nobody's going to attack a country in the middle of elections. And then we'll have to wait to what's going to happen in summer. If the U.S. EU embargo, oil embargo, goes on, then the whole thing will be really, really hot all over again.
Well, I personally think Obama could possibly start a war in order to increase his re-election chances. The only Republican that I think we have a chance of no war going would be with Ron Paul, because he has openly said he will talk with the Iranians, and he thinks we should talk with the Iranians, and it's stupid not to talk to them.
Absolutely, it's a very sound approach from Ron Paul, and no wonder he's so popular, because in terms of foreign policy, he's the anti-war candidate. He's the only one Republican anti-war candidate, and all over the world, people are starting to pay attention to Ron Paul because of that.
Yep. Well, he's an extreme traveler with a nose for news as Pepe Escobar. Thank you very much for joining us from Thailand. We'll see you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, the exercises and the war games continue in the Mideast, and we will see what's going to happen. We know we got somebody over there on the inside. Pepe Escobar was telling me earlier that he's applying to try and get into Iran to be a press correspondent there. So if he does get in, we will have someone on the inside to tell us what's going on. Now, before we go to break, we're going to come back with Mike Adams. We're going to go to our quote of the day, and it's from Henry Ford Sr., inventor of the assembly line. And he said, "It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I would believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." And that's Henry Ford Sr., and he's absolutely right. If people understood what was going on in the Federal Reserve and how our dollar is pretty much worthless, even though other countries think it's very valuable and use it to trade oil, there would be revolution before morning. But they keep us in the dark, they keep us dumb, And you know what they do to mushrooms. They feed them a lot of BS. So we'll be right back after this break. It's Infowars Nightly News, and I'm your host, Rob Dew. Today is Friday, January 20th, 2012.
What's up with these sorry politicians? Lots of bark. When it's showtime, whimpering like little shih tzus. You want big cuts. Ron Paul's been screaming it for years. Budget crisis? No problem. Cut $1 trillion year one. That's trillion with a T. Department of Education? Gone. Interior, Energy, HUD, Commerce? Gone. Later, bureaucrats. That's how Ron Paul rolls. Want to drain the swamp? Ron Paul. Do it.
I'm Ron Paul, and I approve this message.
And we're back. It's Infowars Nightly News. I'm your sit-in host, Rob Dew. It's Friday, January 20th. And I have sitting next to me the Health Ranger, Mike Adams. He's going to come in and talk about a few things. How's it going, Mike?
Hey, pretty good, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for sitting in.
Always good to join you here.
And you did the radio show earlier today. How was that?
Yeah, as always, super high energy, tons of news. Couldn't cover it all.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure one story that you covered, that we covered last night, was this breaking news: cancer drugs make tumors more aggressive and deadly.
Yeah. Well, this is major research that shows the failure of chemotherapy drugs. You know, doctors always talk about shrinking tumors. And they say, well, this chemotherapy drug will shrink the tumor by 25% or 30%. And that's true. And that's the way they measure the success of the drug. But what they don't tell you is that due to this mechanism that's now been discovered and published in this science journal, this medical journal, that there is a 300% increase in secondary tumors, especially in the lungs, because the original chemotherapy weakens the immune system response to future cancer tumor attempts. So in other words, yeah, that tumor, the first tumor you had, was decreased in size, but now you have a 300% increase in secondary tumors. And that's why, Rob, the #1 side effect of chemotherapy is cancer.
Wow. And then what do they make chemotherapy out of anyway? What is it?
Well, they're actually derived from drugs that were used, like mustard gas type of chemical weapons used in World War I. And this comes out of Nazi Germany. This comes out of IG Farben. And you know, the whole Holocaust era of chemicals and crimes against humanity, that is the grandfather, so to speak, of modern chemotherapy drugs, which are so toxic that they damage the liver, they damage the kidneys, and they cause a side effect called chemo brain, where your brain, you're actually dumbed down. It's a dementia-like effect just from chemotherapy.
Well, and I've read a lot about, it's usually not the cancer that kills you. They never say the cancer kills you. It's always the chemo. He died, but they cured the cancer as a result.
Well, you know, and people who survive chemotherapy, they call themselves cancer survivors. They actually probably should call themselves chemotherapy survivors.
Yeah, and so I wonder how this news is going to affect these people, you know, like the Susan G. Komen Foundation and other cancer groups who are out there fighting. You think they're going to take this research and run with it, or you think they're still going to be bought off with the...
Well, let's be clear, Rob. The cancer industry today is based on a system of lies and disinformation. So they're not going to take this scientific study that counters their lies. They're not going to embrace that and start teaching people, well, maybe you should use something else. They're going to continue their lies. But importantly, this study, which was published in Cancer Cell, that's a medical journal, talked about anti-angiogenesis drugs.
Right.
Well, angiogenesis is the process by which cancer tumors build a blood supply to themselves so that they can steal blood and steal minerals and vitamins and start growing as a larger tumor. That's how cancer works. But they don't tell you, and Komen doesn't tell you, that broccoli juice is anti-angiogenesis. That kale, that juicing celery or eating the white stringy substance inside of orange peels or grapefruit peels, not the peel, but the white part inside. Those are all anti-angiogenesis drugs, so to speak, and they don't give you cancer.
Yeah, exactly. And how does this, you know, we're seeing you guys earlier in the year, you and Rob, or I guess last year, you and Rob Jacobson went to Houston to talk with Dr. Brzezinski. I mean, it looks like we're kind of turning the corner here on major breakthroughs in the next couple of years that are actually going to lead to real, you know, cancer cures or at least cancer treatments that aren't going to kill you.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think, Rob, those already exist. The cures are here.
Right.
You can drive down the desert in Arizona where I used to live, and I would drive by 7 or 8 cancer cures as I was, just off the parking lot of the cancer clinic.
Yeah.
And so people would drive by cures and then go in and get poisoned with chemotherapy.
Right, right.
Now, Dr. Brzezinski, as you mentioned, is using gene-targeted microdoses of different chemotherapy drugs, but in a smarter way that's less toxic. So he's not totally holistic, but he's a lot more intelligent about making sure that the drugs you do get are going to work with your genetic profile.
Right.
And that's a personalization of allopathic medicine, which has merit. But the next step is to avoid the poisons altogether and turn to foods, herbs, natural medicines that support your body's ability to fight off cancer rather than compromising it.
Yeah, we're going to have a guest next week, Russell Means, who's fighting cancer right now, throat cancer, and I think esophageal cancer. And he's actually, when he came on about a few months ago, he did an interview with Aaron, and it was about a year from the time that we did an interview with him, and he sounded 100% better than from when we saw him. And, he had just been doing he was staying away from the chemo, staying away from the other stuff, and trying these other natural cures with some science, some stuff that's going on in Arizona. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with his case and what happens with this research. Moving on, another interesting article that we covered earlier in the show. Cyborgs are coming from Mail Online. Living brains implanted with electronic chips to replace faulty parts. And we all know how that could happen, faulty parts. And I love this quote here from Maddie Mintz. Imagine there's a small area in the brain that is malfunctioning. Maybe you're questioning the government too much. Or maybe the
free will section.
Exactly. Maybe you ask too many questions. And imagine that we understand the architecture of this damaged area. So basically what they're doing is taking electronic chips and replacing different parts of the brain. They're doing this in mice. So what's your take on this?
Well, there's this arrogance in technical medicine where they think that they're going to heroically replace your God-given parts, your biological parts, with their brilliant mechanical parts that never really work, by the way. The mechanical heart kills you, usually in a matter of days, if not hours. The new replacement brain parts that they're talking about, those are not going to be as good as the actual neurons that you were born with and that you developed through nutrition and through living as a human being. But there's another concern in all this, Rob. Once they start implanting electronics into human bodies, what are they going to do? They're going to track them. They're going to track every emotion, every thought, your sleep patterns. They're going to put trackers that track your levels of alcohol. They know when you've been drinking too much, and they'll email you a fine and electronically take it out of your debit card in a cashless society. They'll monitor your urine. They'll monitor your blood sugar levels, and then they'll put diabetes drugs into your food automatically. I mean, it's a nightmare of things that they could come up with once they start implanting electronics into you.
Right. So this doesn't sound like this article here, which on Mail Online they kind of sensationalize things, makes it seem like
the Terminator.
The Terminator is going to come and it's going to make you better, more superhuman. And we've already seen people. They're going to the eye implants where they can get emails inside their irises, and they're start off with the glasses, and now it's moving into the eye.
Right.
So I mean, where's it going to stop? Well,
that's the thing. They say it makes you a superhuman, but in reality, it makes you less human.
It definitely makes you less human.
The farther away you get from actual biology and the more into electronics and cyborg technology and implants, the less human you become. You become a machine.
Yeah.
But that's what society wants, the global elite anyway. They want people to act like little robots. So why not just start putting robot parts into your head or into your heart or into your kidneys and turn you into an actual robot? I mean, that is coming. You think about war, they don't want feeling, thinking soldiers on the battlefield.
Right.
They want robots that will do as they're told, that can see in the dark, and shoot civilians without having an ethical question raised.
Well, and that's why they're always shooting them up with drugs at the end, especially these antipsychotic drugs, because these guys can't take what they're doing. It's driving them nuts.
And a lot of those drugs cause, of course, memory lapse. So they don't even remember what happened, which is very convenient for the Pentagon, because then the soldiers can't go on the radio and speak about how they were put in a dangerous situation or abused, chemically abused, for example, whatever happened to them, they don't even remember it anymore because of the drugs.
Right. This reminds me not even of Terminator, but I think there was a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie called Super Soldier or something like that. And
yeah, that sounds right.
They were, they had their implants put in, but they were better. But yeah, they had no feeling in what they were doing. They were all total mindless, mind-numb zombies, and that's what looks like the future coming, from.
That's what they want to do.
Maddie Mintz.
I'm sure they want to clone soldiers. I'm sure they want cyborg soldiers. I'm sure they want to raise them in an environment like that movie, The Island.
Yeah.
Where they're all raised in this fictional environment and told lies about you can't go to the outside world because it's been destroyed by radiation and so on.
Right.
I'm sure they're working on these technologies because it is humanity that gives us the hope to stop violence.
Yeah.
It's people's conscience. It's people's hearts. It's the humanity in us that can actually bring us peace.
It's not going to be people playing Xbox, but actually flying drones into places. I mean, that totally removes you from the situation, and it doesn't provide any humanity or any stopgap action.
Exactly.
You're going in.
It's a video game.
Well, okay, the last thing I wanted to bring up with you, and I talked with you about this last night, was the box that people are put into, especially doctors. If you have there's a world here. I'll draw a little diagram, and the doctors are, let's see, they're brought into this where here's the Red Cross. So they have this box that they're put in.
Yeah.
And there's this whole other world that they're never told about or educated about, or they're dissuaded to go into those areas. This box is here, and it's got drugs and aspirin and little pills for you to take. And what's your feelings on this box that they're put in?
Well, it's pretty cool that you drew this because it's actually very, very educational. You see, medical school is a process by which those doctors who step outside the box are filtered out of the system, or would-be doctors. So you cannot get through medical school unless you are a go-along, get-along, do what you're told, robotic, high IQ individual. See, this is the thing. Doctors are usually very high IQ, just cerebrally, high IQ people, but they don't have a sense of self-navigation. They are people who follow orders. And if you don't follow orders, you get kicked out very quickly. So by the end of it, you go through 4 years of medical school and 4 years of residency, and then you're inundated with basically hypnotic inductions by the pharmaceutical companies.
Right.
Every doctor's walking around with mugs and pens and paper pads, all emblazoned with the
barbecued
logos.
lunches.
It's incredible.
They really treat them nice. I was going for some physical therapy, and every day they were talking about, I wonder what so-and-so is going to bring us.
It was a drug company.
It was a drug company.
Yeah. No, I've talked to nurses who say the drug companies would bring in a dozen donuts, and it would be like a diabetes drug company.
Of course.
Here, get more diabetes.
They're getting more patients for them, I guess. Yeah, and it really, I had, when we were going through the vaccine issue with both my kids, I had these talks with both the doctors, and I would bring in stacks of, articles and studies and showing them things, and they said, oh, well, you've done your research. I'm like, yeah, I have.
Well, that drives them nuts, too, because doctors are also used to being right.
Right.
They're used to being told from the time they're little kids in elementary school, they're always the ones who knew all the answers. So they're used to being told, oh, you must be right because you're smarter than everyone else. What freaks doctors out is when smart guys like you and me, because I was always at the top of my class academically as well, but I can get outside the box.
Right.
And then we can challenge their programming with intelligence that is based on more of an open-minded understanding of reality. That
observation and common sense.
Well, absolutely.
That's a lot of it. What it is, and you have this box here, but the educational system, that's a box they've been doing this since the 1900s. They've put us in this box and pretend that this is the only way the world has worked since the beginning of time, and it's death and taxes, and listen to your doctor and listen to the authority figures. Here's the teacher. They know what's best. Don't question it. And so it's essentially we've been put in this series of boxes. Our whole society is different boxes, big boxes put in bigger boxes. Yeah,
so true. Layers of boxes, and most people who say think outside the box are still living inside the box.
Yeah.
I mean, even us, to some extent, we could still get more outside the box, and we're working on it. But at least where we are right now, we can see how many other people are trapped in the prison that they can't even detect.
Right. Yeah, totally. Alex did an interview with Richard Stallman yesterday, Dr. Stallman, who doesn't use any type of computer or any type of program that you have to do one of these agreements with, like I agree.
Terms of agreement.
Yeah, it's all free software, so he can manipulate it, do what he wants with. I don't know how he does it, but he apparently, is able to do it and travels around, and that's his mantra, is free software. If it ain't free, I don't use it.
Hey, on our website, Natural News, we actually had a terms of agreement for a long time that said by using this website, you agree to fly with monkeys and pay me $1 million. And everybody agreed to that. Yeah. So,
well, nobody ever reads those things, you know. No one ever. They just give me the software, please.
One guy actually complained. He actually, in like 8 years, one guy read it and he sent us a complaint, so we removed the flying monkeys part.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So, yeah, one out of how many?
I don't know.
Hundreds of thousands, millions, yeah. All right, well, Mike, thanks for coming in, talking with us, and it was very enlightening, and enjoyed you on the radio today. And that's our show for today. I appreciate you for joining us. It's Friday, January 20th, and this is the Infowars Nightly News. Please consider becoming a member if you're watching this for free on YouTube or any other service that's out there. It's easy to do, and right now we have a 15-day free trial, and you go to InfoWarsNews.com or PrisonPlanet.tv. And thank you for joining us. My name is Rob Dew. And also, I guess we still have the, I don't know if we still have these specials, but we do have the InfoWarrior special. You can get all of Alex's movies. That's still going on, and I think that's $99.95. So those graphics might be a little old. I don't know. We'll cover them up with something. But anyway, thank you for joining us. This is InfoWars Nightly News. I'm Rob Dew, and we'll see you on Monday. All right, 48.